previously known as Alive.
It was a terrible breakup. His ex is just sad.
Hi, everybody. It's us again. Back to the Todd-Cast. I'm Chuck and Kris and Alyce.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. We're trying to remember specific terminology, and it's turning very silly.
Yeah, it is. Already.
Me and my interesting vocabulary.
With interesting monsters.
Interesting hairdos.
Such an interesting monster, too.
I don't know what we're going to... I don't know how to really start this. Lodo, lower downtown Denver.
Yes. It's a place that you can go that's really quite entertaining and cool now.
Yeah. But
wasn't always.
back in the day, it was... boy, it sure was.
Well, geographically, Denver doesn't sit on an actual east-west plane or north-south-east-west plane. We actually at an angle, and we follow the pattern of the South Platte River. So this section of Denver is actually bordering that follow of the river. So it is lower downtown, but it is on an angle and following the South Platte and the Cherry Creek in that confluence space. So that's where we're at geographically, and it's gone through a lot of changes over time. And like Kris was saying, now it's really a very hoppin' cool place to be. It's been under some big renovations, which Chuck, I'm sure you're probably going to talk about in your section.
A little.
And just how it's really, thanks to Mayor Wellington Webb, pushed to change and revitalize the section of town that had a pretty not so good reputation for a long time.
Yeah.
It was dicey. Okay.
Very dicey.
It was dicey.
Yep.
This is where, and still today, a lot of the Denver homeless do gather and hang out. There was a structure at one time there for the longest time was an abandoned grain elevator and abandoned grain silo, and we called it jokingly Bum's Castle.
And then it was also the graveyard for the railroad. And so all the old cars would be in there too.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Yeah, this is where the rail yards were. This is where all the trains would come through. This is when I made the statement about Globeville and right next to the rail yards. Globeville and lower downtown are very, very close to each other.
Yeah.
Very close.
So. And both are going through some big changes and big renovations. So.
Absolutely are, yeah. Yeah, when I was little, so the first thing to get kind of fixed up was what we now call Larimer Square, which we've already kind of gotten into, but before that Yeah, not really. But before that, this whole area was just very sketchy, and we were all warned never to go down there, and then they fixed up Larimer Square, so that became nice. But then you didn't have to get too far off of Larimer Square before it got all dicey again. So now that's no longer the case at all, but It was when I was growing up. I remember just you could go to Larimer Square and then you went home.
That was it.
Yeah, and honestly, because that's really all there really was. To
yeah.
do,
I mean, there was the 16th Street Mall, but at that time it wasn't the mall like we know it now.
Yeah.
That didn't have traffic. I mean, 16th Street was a street like any other.
16th Street was mid to late 80s when it came about.
As a mall.
As a mall.
And the big shopping district. And everything.
Yeah.
Right around the same time that they renovated the Tivoli.
Right.
Which is also part of lower downtown.
The brewery. It was an actually active brewery.
Yeah. And Auraria campus with Metropolitan State College.
Now it's State University.
Yes, Metropolitan State University, excuse me.
It got upgraded.
And the University of Colorado, Denver, and the Community College of Denver. And I believe that there is a fourth that they're talking about putting there.
There's a branch of CU.
I already talked about that.
Did you say CU Denver?
CU Denver, yeah.
I wasn't paying attention to you.
I'm like, that's where I went to college.
Chuck was saying words
so-
that I instinctively sometimes tune him out.
Yeah, what's new?
Oh, siblings.
Little sister privilege.
Yeah, whatever helps you sleep. Okay, whatever helps you sleep.
Oh.
So, let's kick it off with some history, and I think this is where I cue the black and white grainy photo and the
Yeah.
weird
Old-timey music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right about here. Lower downtown Denver, affectionately called the Lodo, is a neighborhood in rich history, controversy, and wonderfully eccentric characters. We kind of alluded to that already.
Yeah.
Let's see. As the birthplace of our city and a recent revitalization success story, the area provides an important link between the past and the present. Today, Lodo contains one of the finest remaining collections of late 19th century and early 20th century commercial buildings in the American West.
Yeah.
I will notably talk about Ice House. Is one
yes.
of them.
Yeah.
And I will put up some footage from your trip doing the Wizard of Oz
Yeah.
scavenger
Yeah.
hunt thing. Also, naturally, Union Station.
That whole thing was
Yeah.
started in Lodo
Yeah.
and area, so
Well,
that
what-
will walk that. Yeah.
You'll be keying us off with Union Station. There are several buildings down there that still have the old truck docks sitting and facing the street. What else was down there?
They still have the access to the street elevators that go underground,
Yes.
and that's a lot of the restaurants still get their food delivery that way.
Exactly. The city of Denver was founded at the confluence of the South Platte and the Cherry Creek in November of 1858. The reason is because it was a gold camp, and we talked about that a little bit.
Yeah, I
History,
covered
yeah.
a little bit too with
Yeah.
Confluence Park.
Let's see. After a small amount of gold was discovered in the area, of course. Prior to that time, the area had been inhabited by Native Americans, mostly Cheyenne and Arapaho, who had legal title to the land at the signing of the Treaty of Fort Laramie in 1851. Legal possession of the region, including the area that would become Denver, passed to the United States in 1861.
I'm going to jump in here to say I just am in the process of reading a book for a book club, and it was called The Woman of Light, and it was a semi-autobiography. It's fiction, but based on a woman's life who's Native American, have Native American heritage, and she talks a lot about this area, and the Native American, Hispanic cultures were kind of all congregating in this area.
Okay.
And it's a really good book if you're interested in Denver history, like as told through fiction, but not white people, kind of a different perspective of the history of Denver.
There's actually a tie to that because one of the underpasses, it's a Spear underpass. So above it is Spear, but it's the Little Raven, I think, street. And one side is a mural of the Mexican
right.
culture.
Yes.
And that's if you look, looking east, it's the Mexican culture. And if you turn around and look west, it's the Native American.
Oh, neato.
And it's really cool. It was done like in the 99, 2000 area when they were doing the revitalization.
Oh, okay. I'll have to go. I've seen pictures, but I want to go see it live. Continue.
Well, thank you. Let's see. Legal possession of the region, including the area that would become Denver, passed the United States in 1861 with the Treaty of Fort Wise, which to this day is still contested. Let's see. The first towns that were here were Auraria and St. Charles. We'll talk about a little bit of Auraria with, like I mentioned earlier, about the schools that are there. A little bit of Auraria Village, which is still there, which is part of the campus, which is part of Auraria campus. We mentioned that before. I don't know that much about St. Charles.
I don't either. I'd never heard about that.
That one merits some more research and merits a deeper dive. So we'll try and do that a little later. Not tonight, but in future episodes. St. Charles began and ended as a single log cabin located on the 1400 block between Blake and Wazee Streets. After William Larimer, a town founder, jumped the St. Charles claim to build Denver City. Auraria across the creek disappeared after merging with Denver City in April in 1860. Well, there it is. St. Charles is beginning and its end as a single building. Let's see, the buildings were long wooden sheds, of course. False fronts were raised with raised porches that doubled as sidewalks, just as every old West town that you've ever seen. Let's see, when the cottonwood trees along Cherry Creek were exhausted, settlers turned to making bricks from the rich clay deposits found in abundance around Denver. Bentonite is your friend. And bentonite...
No, it's not.
Bentonite is what makes all of our foundations crack around this town, because when it gets wet, it raises like a cake. Let's see, where was I? The low cost of bricks, coupled with a devastating fire in 1863 and the passing of a Sydney ordinance, resulted in Denver's commercial district evolving into brick and stone construction. The buildings were warm orange red brick, characterized by repetitive round arch windows and bays, with simple brick cornices and arched brick arcades. And hopefully I will have pictures depicting that here. Let's see, the arrival of the railroad in 1870 brought new businesses and improved economy, and a fast link to the east. In addition, the railroad brought new building materials such as pressed and cast metals, which were used for cornices and storefront columns, window hoods, adding the decoration of all that to the plain facades of the Denver commercial buildings. A number of excellent examples of these early structures remain in Lodo, including 1515 and 1533 Market, 1515 and 1540 Wazee Streets.
I drive by it every day.
I know.
I drive through that every day.
Yeah, because you're right down there, right down there.
Yeah, that's my commute. I don't go on the highways, so I go through Lodo every day.
When I was younger, in our younger days, especially when Kris and I were first dating, there was a little coffee shop over, and I can't remember what the name of the street it was on, but it was Paris on the Platte.
It's on Platte Street. So the aquarium's on Water Street. At 15th, it splits. It's on Platte.
Oh,
Water Street.
Okay.
They split.
Yeah, because Paris on the Platte's not there anymore.
There's a new tea house in it, but the building's still there.
Well, okay. But yeah, it used to be, you go there for coffee. Kris and I performed there one time with our band that we used to belong to, and it was a lot of fun. Let's see. By the mid-1870s, Denver's retail trade had shifted uptown, so farther away from all the rails, all the railroads. Yeah, probably it shifted uptown as the growing streetcar system encouraged development. So Denver had streetcars. We had streetcars. The notable thing the reason that I remember we had streetcars is because one of my mom's favorite restaurants was located in one of the old streetcar buildings.
It's one of my favorite restaurants too.
That's very true.
I love it.
Yes. It was called the Old Spaghetti Factory.
So good.
And it was a chain. It's a chain store.
Yeah.
And there was one in Oklahoma. There's a couple in California.
San Francisco, yeah.
Yeah. It's around the west area here. But yeah, one of the notable things is that you could actually go eat your spaghetti dinner inside one of the streetcars.
Yeah. Because like you said, the building that it was in was one of the repair shops or something like that.
Yeah, it was
like,
the old shack.
Yeah.
It was the old store or storage.
You really went for eating amongst the antiques and in that building and being in this space. I mean, the spaghetti's good, don't get me wrong, but it really was an outing because that was a really cool place to eat.
It was because it was, again, ambiance, fun, theming.
Good. It was great.
We fall for it.
You would eat, like they'd make the booths out of old 1920s beds. So you're eating in a bed frame, and the lighting and the 20s architecture and the furniture and all that velvet.
Oh yeah.
And when they had to close that down, they opened it again up north, closer to us actually.
Yeah.
And they did their best.
They've kept it.
They tried
to keep that theming and moved all the furniture, and there's a cable car, and so they did their best to try and recreate the atmosphere.
But It's not the same.
Well, of course
It's not the same because
building.
you don't get to walk into the big archway.
And those heavy doors
Yes.
and the creaky floor.
Yes.
It was just so good.
Anyway, all right. Sorry about that.
Food.
Despite this exodus of business, Lodo continued to boom as wholesale businesses established themselves around the railroad yards. Although the buildings constructed prior to 1870 were usually simple two-story structures, these warehouses were more massive utilitarian buildings that were often adorned with interesting brickwork and window details. As you're coming in on Spear Boulevard, if you're coming in to downtown, if you look to your right, just after the exits to go to the Pepsi Center, there is a 3 or 4 story building there that's a furniture store.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the old warehouses.
Mm-hmm.
That's still there and still, I mean, it's worth going to the furniture store just for that
Walking
building.
around the building.
Yep.
Yeah.
Denver City Railway Building at 1635 17th Street and the Sturby Eastbrook Building at 1667 17th Street remain as 2 examples of warehouses appointed with fine architectural detail. And I will try to find pictures of that as well. Most of this now just goes into narration about architecture. In 1973, we've jumped 100 years. Jumped 103 years. The 1400 block of Larimer Street was designated Denver's first historic district, sparking a movement to save the ancient heart of town from the wrecking ball of urban renewal, because there were a lot of developers coming in to start trying to knock down these buildings for that property and for that real estate.
Mm-hmm.
The following trend was small, but the growing number of urban pioneers saw the potential value of the area and began to invest and renovate its many interesting buildings. In March of 1988, the unique historical and architectural value of this area was officially recognized by the city and county of Denver when it was declared Lower Downtown a historic district. And I think that's about where I'm going to stop with all that, because we go into a whole lot of detail of the legislative process.
Please, yeah. No. I struck all of that out of my notes as well.
Because, okay, we understand that these things are boring as it is. And so, okay, now we're going to kick it off with some very important structures that are downtown or that are in Lodo. And it's, well, this is kind of nice because, as you mentioned before, Alyce, you work down there.
I do. I go down there every day.
Yep, you work down there. So, if you would please give us your perspective. Oh, I'm sorry.
So,
Kitten.
one of the big, important things about Denver as a city is it's a gateway to a lot of places, and one of the important things to remember is getting over our mountains has always been a big challenge. So growing the West had a lot of hindrances because you had these huge granite structures blocking your way. So trying to figure ways around that was really important. In 1870, though, a lot of things changed because that's when the railroad came to Denver. And they were able to figure out bypasses to go up to Laramie and through Laramie, Wyoming, where the mountains were a lot smaller. But Denver became that bypass, or the center to connect Denver to Laramie to the west, and then Denver to Kansas City to the east. So all of that railroad met at our Union Station here in Denver.
What about heading south to go down the mountain or around the mountain?
Not as big because the mining was up in this the northern direction. So it was really an integral space in getting the mining equipment to that side of the mountains, going up through Laramie and then back down.
Gotcha.
Versus straight down and then back up.
Gotcha.
Okay. So that's where the big hook was. So 1870 is when Union Station was at, or the railroad came, and then Union Station had a small building in that space. But 11 years later is when things really began to change, because that's when we saw big momentum with all of the incoming and influx of people, equipment, stuff. Like you're getting a lot of merchandise coming from the east into Colorado, and Denver was that space. So in 1881 is when they saw another big renovation of the original building. Now the original building was that center structure. If you look at it a modern day, it's what you see straight down 17th as Union Station over it. That center structure was the first thing built, and then they added in the side pieces to it. And it was really the spot where trains came in, merchandise, cargo was in and out, people, all of that happened in there. It was destroyed by a fire and then had to be rebuilt and brought back. And then that's when the big push for making it a huge destination came. So 1914 was when the outer rings were originally constructed. After that, 1881. So between 1881 and 1914, this area was always changing, and the railroad was having a big, huge influence on that. 2014, I believe, was when the most recent reimagining of Union Station came about. So it had been upkept. It had been really working as a center for rail.
Yeah.
But in 2014, it went through this huge overhaul where a hotel was put in on top of it. Big, huge restaurants were put in, and this coincided with a big influx in the commuter rail system in Denver, and really making Union Station that space where the commuter rails would come in to drop people off. So it was really transitioning from that commercial type of rail experience to travel and big travel. The Colorado Zephyr from Union Pacific. Is it Union Pacific?
I don't remember.
Whatever. We'll fix it. Colorado Zephyr is one of the rails that goes through Union Station. Colorado Zephyr goes from California to Illinois and works its way through there. So that's a big commuter rail. You can actually go cross country and go through Union Station on the rail system as well. So it's a integral part and a really important part of how this region was able to grow and bring in a lot of commerce and a lot of equipment necessary for our, gold boom that happened in the mining boom, but also helping transition from that kind of industry to commuter rails and people industry. So that's a little bit about Union Station. It is kind of the hallmark piece of lower downtown. I love riding the train into town. It's a lot cheaper. It's a lot easier.
Yeah.
So it's a great place, cool places to eat, beautiful. They've really maintained the architecture and keeping in with the Art Deco,
They really
1920s kind of flavor to it. The old benches that used to sit in the middle of it. It was your traditional rail station where there were benches everywhere for people to sit and wait for the train. Those benches have been saved and are used for that purpose. But then you have this beautiful lounge that's in there, and you've got some really great speakeasies, if you will, some really fun restaurants. One of the staples of Denver, the Tattered Cover, has a branch in there. So it's a really good place. It's a great destination. I recommend it to people who are visiting downtown. I was like, you have to go to Union Station. Then it's a great place all year long. So along with that, though, with the rebranding of lower downtown and Union Station being one of those places, is the addition of Coors Field. Now, Colorado for the longest time, believe it or not, did not have a professional baseball team. We had AAA for a long time. We had the Denver Bears and then the Colorado Zephyrs.
Yep.
But professional baseball did not come to Colorado until 1995. April 26, 1995 was when Coors Field actually opened, but we had already established ourselves with playing baseball in Colorado at Mile High. So that happened in the very first Colorado Rockies game was in 1993.
Mm-hmm.
I was a freshman in college, and I had a 400-person geography class, and 20 of us showed up to class that day. Because everybody went to Coors. Well, not even Coors Field. Just everybody went downtown to watch them play. So it was hilarious. But so Coors Field is actually in the, I would say, north end of lower downtown, if you will. It's at that 20th and Blake area. So that's kind of the top end of the lower downtown area. And one of the things that they were really smart about with it is in its construction, they wanted to honor the architecture of the space around it. So they kept the red brick buildings. They kept the warehouse feel of it. They kept a lot of the arches that Chuck was talking about in its structure. So it really does feel like it has always been in that space, but smack in the middle of it is a baseball field. So that construction began in 1992. In October of 1992 is when they began the construction of it, and it did not finish until 1995 when they were able to start playing baseball there on April 26th. Like I said, the design was a little bit modeled after Orioles Park, because that's another similar baseball park where it's in an industrial space, maintaining that architecture. Interestingly enough, too, Coors Field was the newest, quote unquote, baseball field that had been built since Dodger Field in the 60s. So a national baseball franchise had not had a new baseball field built until the 90s. That was kind of an interesting fun fact that I found in my research. I was like, huh. Yeah, Dodger Field was the last baseball field in National League built until Coors Field in the 90s. So that was interesting. Coors Field does sit at 1 mile above sea level, 5,280 feet, and it is marked exactly. You can sit exactly 1 mile above sea level in that park, and it's marked by the purple seats up at the top. So there's a row of purple seats, and then there's 2 rows of green seats above it. So there, it's almost exactly those seats are. So it's not much higher than 1 mile high. Some interesting features of the park. They have a space for kids to play. There's the rock pile. This is your traditional bench seating. It's straight center field. Right below it is some beautiful plants, native plants, fountains. And then when it first opened, it's not this way anymore, but when it first opened, all of the seats for the rock pile were $1. So you could go watch baseball for $1. And it was fantastic. It's great baseball. I mean, you're straight center field and you can watch those pitches and you see the ball move and everything. It was awesome. We would go, our Uncle Eddie was a baseball player, and when we would go with him, he loved to sit in the rock pile because he could watch pitches, and he would, geek out being a baseball player, and he loved that. So Coors Field was one of the impetuses of really revitalizing lower downtown and really changing the flavor of it and bringing people downtown for activities. It wasn't on the outskirts because, Mile High Stadium was on the outskirts. McNichols Arena was always on the outskirts. This actually brought things to downtown to have people participate in. And it's been there ever since 1995. It is going under some renovations because it's 30-ish years old. So it needs to have some upgrades and things. They've added a really kind of cool bar area. Our baseball has traditionally not been the best baseball.
We had a year.
It was great.
We had a year.
But we're not known for being a baseball town, but everybody goes to the baseball games because going to Coors Field's beautiful. And one of the cool things too about the view is they've opened up the view to the west, and you have a beautiful view of the mountains, and then the sunsets are amazing. So it's a full experience.
It's a gorgeous stadium.
You're watching some baseball, and we have National League's got some great teams to come in. You get some good Dodger baseball. You get good baseball. You get good baseball. It's just maybe the Rockies aren't necessarily playing the best baseball.
Well, no, but you can see some. You can see some world-class players.
Great players. We've hosted the All-Star Game twice. So that's been kind of fun. And one of the keys to being at 1 mile above sea level is that the ball flies.
Boy, does it.
And it's known for being a home run park. So you get some great home runs, and you can Google that history of the home runs there. But one of the big changes in the early to mid 2000s was they petitioned the baseball league to add a humidor to keep the balls nice and humid so they wouldn't fly, because it became this really unfair advantage of, the home run records were just being killed. I mean, So, and that's because the ball dries up and shrinks. It's a harder ball, it flies. So the humidor helps keep the balls at regulation size.
Yeah, that and also our rarefied air.
And no air, yes. So, dry, light air, things are going to fly. So, So that's another big space. So we've got Union Station, not even 4 blocks away is Coors Field to the north. You get this really influx of space. And then you go down a little bit farther to where I'm at in the confluence area, which is where the aquarium's at. So this is on the opposite side of Union Station, on that, what I would say, south end of Lodo. We're kind of getting in that border of outskirts of town here, but really an integral spot because I am 300 feet away from the confluence of where gold was first found in Colorado. And,
yes, you are.
Like that's all started there. So the downtown aquarium opened in 1999 as Colorado's Ocean Journey. I have notes, which is kind of funny because I lived this. So it was hard for me to organize. I lived this. So it's hard to organize your thoughts and figure out
That's
okay, what do
I asked you to do it.
I know, but it's just, it's hard to talk about something that was what is so trying to organize it. So anyway, Ocean Journey opened on June 21st, 1999 as Denver's first and only aquarium, actually the Rocky Mountain region's first and only aquarium. At the time, we were the 5th largest in the United States, but that has quickly changed because aquariums have been built all over the place. But we still are over 1 million gallons of water, and we house a lot of variety of animals. We are AZA accredited, so we are held to a very high standard. And a big part of that is conservation education and letting people see things that they normally would not see being a landlocked state. And one of the big things I find very important for my work is that we're probably the only ocean a lot of folks are ever going to see, but we are so intimately connected to it with the Colorado River system that what we do upriver makes a huge difference, and we need to make sure that we're doing things that matter, and we can make a difference, and it's not lost.
Well, and that was the origination, whether it was Ocean Journey.
Yeah, when it was Ocean Journey, we were 2 river systems, the Colorado River system and the Compar River system, half a world apart, Colorado Island to Sumatra, and it was the river mountains to the sea, and you followed the rivers down from their origins and their confluence or their headwaters all the way down to their endings, and the influence that water had in all of those habitats. 2003, we had some issues and were purchased wholly outright by Landry's Restaurants Incorporated. And in 2005, reopened and rebranded as the Downtown Aquarium, where it changed its focus a little bit from the 2 river systems to water, and the emphasis and importance water has on all living things, and how water is found and used and important, and what we do to that essential piece of life is important, and we all can make a difference. So that's a little bit of a 30,000 foot view of the aquarium. In its essence, we have been around and helping educate people, and like I said, bringing that ocean to folks for a very long time. Kind of the fun parts of that space. Oh, I forgot to talk about this with Coors Field. When you're building in this area, you find some fun things. So one of the cool things they found in Coors Field was Triceratops bones. Right. So the mascot, when they unveiled the mascot on the first day of baseball, Dinger hatched out of an egg. And Dinger is a Triceratops because those were the bones that were found. So we have, dinosaur bones that are found in this area. And where the aquarium was built, there were a lot of Native American artifacts that were found and returned to the tribes. So and in fact, when the aquarium first opened, we had a land blessing from Arapaho.
Oh, cool.
That came in and did that. So, it has been a very important space for industry and peoples coming together, whether it's settlers or native peoples. this is a really important space in Colorado and Denver history as well, and honoring that, and you get to see the architecture and the history of that. So it's a happening place, and it's been a happening place for a really long time. So those are my spaces. Like I said, I'm in it every day. I drive by those things all the time, and the growth and change has been huge.
Right on.
So,
well, yeah, I mean, Confluence Park, there was so much change that has happened over there over the last 100+ years, because we've actually changed the flow and direction of the rivers.
Which leads me to
There
talk
you go.
about Confluence Park. So
is that the way you want to start with Confluence?
I am,
yes,
because
it's right there.
it flows. We were all
Just don't go.
Oh my
Not
God.
intended.
Oh.
all righty.
Good night, everybody.
So now, Confluence Park is an urban park encompassing the confluence of Cherry Creek and the South Platte in Lodo. And it's a bustling district of 19th century brick warehouses and storefronts. Where it came from, though, we've already mentioned it a time or two. Decades before there were white settlers, Native Americans would use this space as their overwinter grounds. Then the white settlers came in 1858. So Confluence, as we've mentioned, is where the William Greenberry Russell's party began its local search for gold in May of 1858. And while they found no gold at Confluence, they did about 4 miles south in Little Dry Creek. They turned up good diggings anyway, which then started the gold rush, and this was an important encampment for the gold rush. There were early plans to lay this out as a park in this location, but it never really came to fruition there early on. And in fact, the site served as a dumping ground, and had an electric substation, and it was kind of not a place you'd really want to be. However, in 1965, June 16th specifically, there was a 1,000-year flood. So you two had fires that devastated the places you were talking about. I have a flood. 14 inches of rain falls in 4 hours, sending torrents of water down the South Platte and through the heart of Denver, which destroyed homes, bridges, businesses. Everything just kind of washed away.
Now, I'm going to make a quick aside on this because we actually had something very, very close to that happen when I was working for Pony Express in 92.
Yes.
And it was so bad that the Cherry Creek flooded up to the overpasses.
Mm-hmm.
It sure did.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If that kind of water had happened today, the aquarium would have been underwater.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. We get asked about that all the time.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So, sorry, I didn't mean to take away, but...
No, it's... Yes.
That was my aside. Yeah.
Yes. And we call it 1,000-year flood. Now I feel like they call it the 100-year floods because they do happen every once in a while. Everything was left in destruction and debris. But what comes from disaster is growth, right? So reclaiming the river. So from 1974 to 1980, we have Denver Mayor Bill McNichols appoints State Senator Joe Shoemaker as chairman of the Platte River Development Committee and is charged with initiating the reclamation of the South Platte River. Shoemaker ends up being a part of this development and growth for about 40 years. So he may have been a quick appointment, but it was a long-term passion for him to see this through. So Wenck Associates was commissioned by the city to develop a master plan for this, transforming this space into a park and an urban gathering place, and greatly expanded opportunities to access the river's edge and recommended additional recreational uses and leisure opportunities. So galvanized by Shoemaker with the establishment of his Greenway Foundation in 1974, community groups and the city of Denver began to reclaim this once blighted area. And so over the next 20 years until 1980 and continuing through even now, the electric substation was removed, the confluence was dredged, and an urban whitewater park was designed by the Architera Group.
Mm-hmm.
And the industrial remains were buried and capped by a lawn, creating an amphitheater overlooking the waterways. It's gorgeous.
It's gorgeous. They used to do concerts there in the park.
Mhm. Yeah.
Every summer we see kayakers go through there and use the water and practice with that.
Mhm.
Would I choose to get I would not choose to get in the water and do that. But
The
TGO.
water is brown.
Well,
it's because there's mud, but
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
Well, it's
You know,
also
my
there's a
favorite
reason
thing?
that
Can
the
I go
water's
off
that
on a-
color.
Can I go off on a tangent?
sure,
There's beaver in the water.
there are.
I love them. There's a mated pair and they're awesome and they're building their
And
dam.
muskrats too.
They're building their dam and they're awesome. I call them Franklin and Francine. Franklin, number one, used to live when I was at the aquarium back in 2000. And Franklin, number one, would take out all the aspen trees and all the people at the aquarium would get mad. And I'd be like, go Franklin, because that's what beavers are supposed to do. And I loved him. And then he'd also eat the fermented apples off of our trees in the parking lot and get drunk. And he'd sit there and we could
Get behind the wheel and
hang out with Franklin.
spin around.
And
Yeah.
not recommended. This is not, as an animal care professional, I'm telling you, don't do this. But as an animal care professional, I know how to do this. But Franklin's amazing. So Franklin and Francine are there. We might have babies.
Yay!
Ta-da!
And the Greenway Foundation, in addition to working on building this area, has also done several water cleanup
Cleanups,
projects. And I know I helped participate in one
Yes.
that the aquarium.
Yeah, we partner
sponsored
with the
one year.
Greenway all the time. Yeah. Or we used to.
So, they're constantly working to make that river as clean as they can. They also put in some interesting water reclamation, like the drains and things all through this Lodo area, knowing that the crap that goes into a drain eventually gets into that river. So it cleans up before it gets down there.
And also helping with the floodplain because
Yes.
they want to try and help with diversions of much water as possible so they don't have the destruction that they had in the past.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that whole bike path, South Platte, Cherry Creek River project, and it goes way beyond confluence. And the way they dredged and built up the roads to be higher and, so that the flooding absolutely buries the bike path on the years that we have bad rains, but the roads and the buildings are safer. I suppose.
Yeah.
1,000-year flood,
It can happen.
Nothing's gonna stop it. But yeah, for most of our heavy rain seasons, everything's okay now. So from Shoemaker Plaza at grade level, they do whitewater below, and it's accessed through arcing ramps, passing through native grasses and groves of cottonwood and willow. And the site has also continued to expand for residential and retail and other recreational venues. Were you going to say something? Because I was going to jump in with what
No.
it is today. Okay.
She burped.
I didn't burp.
Oh,
I was going to say something, but I changed my mind.
oh okay.
Okay. So today, the park includes the concrete trails filled with walkers, runners, and bikers. And I will say, if you're a walker, beware, because the bikers and runners think it's an interstate. Grassy areas, river overlooks, park benches. There are 2 pedestrian bridges now that cross. One crosses the South Platte and one crosses Cherry Creek at the confluence. And there's a kayak run immediately across from REI's flagship store. So that's the Recreational Equipment Inc. And this is the huge flagship store. It is in the trolley building, right?
Yes.
Yeah, because there's a
Big sign
An
that says
historic-
outside of it. Trolley building.
Yep.
And outside there is an historic trolley, but also there is a real trolley that now originates there, and it runs along the west side of the South Platte River through the summer. So
Every
Memorial
summer.
Day to Labor Day, and for all of the home games of the Broncos.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
So-
And they do a great job of doing some history. It's a great little ride. There's a stop at right outside the aquarium, so you can catch it there.
Nice.
But it's a tie back. Fun fact, tie into that. Our annex building at the aquarium that houses our quarantine building was the old trolley offices. It's a historical building. We can't ever destroy it. And the old safe for the bank and the money for the trolley system in Denver is in that building. So
cool. Okay.
That's another fun fact.
So the other landmark that I want to talk about in Lodo is a place called the El Chapultepec. It is an
R.I.P.
I know. It's no longer with us.
That's
I
right.
know.
That's right.
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
It closed in 2020. However, it does live on in its legacy project, which I will get to. So Chapultepec is one of Denver's most storied jazz and blues venues. And yes.
Setting the
Some
mood.
jazz. All right.
Yeah, I
Setting the
tried to
mood.
find some.
Sweet. It was established in 1933 by Charlie Romano, probably, right after the end of the Prohibition. Yeah. Theoretically, that's when it opened. So the eventual owner is Jerry Krantz, and the Krantzes ran it, and then for 50, 60 years until it closed. Yeah, until they decided to close it. So, many theories about the name El Chapultepec, and everyone acknowledged there's no real understanding of how it got that name. And when Jerry took it over, he said, "It ain't broke, so don't fix it." So that's what it's still called. There's also rumors that it was a speakeasy before the end of the Prohibition.
I believe that.
But nobody can or will officially confirm this.
We will confirm nor deny.
That's right. However, there is a trap door behind the bar that leads into an underground exit leading,
To
which
the alley,
kind of
right?
lends to this theory.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, when it first opened, it was basically one of the many kind of seedy bars in a seedy neighborhood, and it was
It was a dive bar.
It was a dive.
It was
but
a dive.
But
it
so
was
good.
what they say is like it's a beer and shot kind of place for the local workers. It was 2 doors down from an infamous brothel called Maddie's House of Mirrors. Yeah,
Isn't that where the Real World cast had their house?
maybe.
It
With
could
the
have
old
been.
brothel? 'Cause
Could
they
have
were
been. I
down.
thought they were closer to Larimer.
No, they were they were right near here
Okay.
in Lodo. Yeah.
Well, I know they were in Lodo, but I thought they were closer down like
No.
15th or 14th.
No, it's up.
Could have been.
It's right. It's right in the
Yep.
Coors Field area.
I will figure it out.
Yeah, I
will
thought it was
figure it out.
Wouldn't that have been hilarious if they put the Real World kids in the brothel? That would be hilarious.
And then, and it was also right across the street from, it says, a hotel straight out of a Western movie. So who knows what that
All right.
means.
Pew, pew, pew.
Yeah, pew pew. And then a freight train ran 20 feet from the front door up to the late 80s. And so the Chapultepec had to close at midnight on Sundays because this train was dangerous, passing 20 feet from the front door. And so there we go. And so Jerry Krantz, the person, and then his family who kind of took it and ran with it in the 50s, he was a Denver native, served in the Korean War. When he got discharged in the 50s, he went to Chicago to find work and ended up working at a jazz club and ended up meeting a bunch of now famous people and, all the things that one does working in a jazz club. And so then when he returned to Denver, he started working at the Peck is what it's called, nicknamed. And he started courting and eventually married Tony Romano's daughter, Julia. So Julia and Jerry ran the Chapultepec then. Through the 60s and 70s, it was a working man's bar still, but Jerry longed for that feeling of getting a jazz club until then, until he transformed the Chapultepec, the jazz in Denver was very high end, black tie. There was a lot of it, but it was definitely for the rich. And he didn't like that, right? He wanted it to be everyone to be exposed to jazz. So kind of started then at what it became famous for. So in the late 70s, he approached some local jazz musicians. Hey, you want to come and play? One of them was Freddie Rodriguez Sr., who was a prominent local jazz saxophonist. And kind of that was the beginning. So Freddie was like, yeah, it was a dump. And it's still like it never really got over that dump status, but it became part of its thing.
The charm
of it. Absolutely. Has the black and white tile floors, the old linoleum tables, and so they say cool jazz and hot burritos. And hot, spicy hot. Like the burritos
they were good.
That was so Colorado.
Yeah, they were good, but man, they made my ears tickle. They were so spicy.
Yeah, we went one time on a date night.
Yeah, because this was a hangout for me.
Right.
I was a music major down at CU Denver, and jazz was the thing that you did as a music major at CU Denver.
Right.
And we would go hang out there all the time. And like one of my schoolmates, that's the word, actually managed to get up on stage there, which was a big deal. You always tried to get up on stage with them, but yeah, it was quite the place. So when Jerry brought in the jazz, he said no cover charge, two drink minimum per person per set, no reservations, first come, first serve, and no dress code. He wanted every person to have access to this music that he loved so much.
The no smoking section is under the table on the floor.
Under the table on the floor.
Yeah.
You got it. So pretty soon it was hosting jazz 7 nights a week. The burritos kept coming. Word started to spread. When I started going there, which was in the early mid 80s through when we went in the early 90s.
Right.
It was definitely a known thing. Thanks to the Rocky Mountain News, who ran a front page story on the place in 1983. And house bands, he was like, my house band has the chops and could play with anybody in the world. And they kind of proved that, because people around the world, jazz musicians, would just drop in and join in a jam session. Tommy Dorsey Band came. I have a whole list, which I'm not going to read, but some famous names who stopped by.
2 hours later.
But essentially, Dorsey was his band was kind of the start. They came in to do their formal gig, stopped by there, and stayed for 2 days because they loved it so much.
Right on.
Yeah, so he just, even once they became popular, and I know we had to like skedaddle over there by like 6 p.m. Otherwise, you couldn't get a seat and could barely get in.
Right.
Anytime we went like later in the evening, you just knew you were just going to be jammed in their standing room only.
There were nights that I remember when I had the evening route downtown. And when I was working for Pony Express, I would drive down through there because I had 2 drop-offs.
Yeah.
And there was a line.
Always
out
a line
the door,
out the door.
All the way around from the front door, all the way back up to 19th Street.
Mm-hmm.
And back over across Larimer, across over Lawrence, and
it's not that big of a place.
No,
and
it's
so,
tiny inside.
Yeah,
it's itty bitty.
And the stage, that was something the musicians always joked about too. Is it's this itty bitty stage, and but that's part of the charm, right? Because you didn't have to be super mic'd.
Yeah,
you didn't have to have fancy speakers. You
don't
just
get
play.
wild. Yeah, drummers don't get wild, man.
I remember they would have this, they'd keep the doors open, because it was blazes hot.
Oh yeah.
But you could just stand on the street corner and listen.
Yeah.
You didn't even have to go in. You got
that's true.
all the kind of music that you wanted on the street corner.
That was the cool part when I had that drop off, is I get out of the car, I would hear the jazz all the time. And it was just,
And I wonder how many of the unhoused, because there was a shelter like literally next door, the next block, the next corner
over.
Yeah.
Towards Broadway. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Was a big shelter. And so obviously all these folks got to hear the jazz all night long as well. So for the next 40 years, Chapultepec saw just about every jazz musician a person could name. That was one of the fun things about going there, is you never know who you were going to see. You could have had a concert with someone that, the night before you paid good money to go see, and they just were showing up here to play with the house band and have a good time. And it was great. And became sort of a rite of passage to sit in with the band. And they also didn't pull any punches as far as giving you criticism on how you could approve. And if you sucked, you got to step down. But yes, playing a song or two with these guys was just an honor.
Well, at least it's not like the old Apollo in New York,
well, they throw
where they literally yank you off the stage.
True. Yeah. So, some of the names of folks that stopped by: Doc Severinsen, Chet Baker, Art Blakey, Etta James, the entire Tonight Show band.
With Doc Stevenson, right?
Severinsen.
Or Severinsen, sorry.
Yeah. And then the second generation included Harry Connick Jr. and his whole band.
Cool.
Natalie Cole, Chick Corea.
Now see. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. And then third generation, Ben Markley and Gabe Mervine. And, so you just, again, never knew who came by. And then it wasn't just jazz musicians either. So Dave Matthews, Santana. It talks about Red Hot Chili Peppers, but they're a local band. They started in Denver. Bill Clinton. I bet he got to play a saxophone up there. Christopher Walken, Pat Morita.
Fun.
Yeah, right? And in fact, there's a funny story because in 92, the U2 guys came over and wanted to come in, but the girls they were with were very young looking and they didn't have IDs. And Jerry was very, very strict about having IDs. I mean, you'd have to down there because of just...
you don't
at that
want to
point,
lose your license.
Exactly. And Jerry was also famous for, if it wasn't jazz, he didn't know anything about it. So he didn't know who these guys were. And he said, and so he just goes up to him and says, "You two and the bimbos you came in with can get the hell out then."
All right. Well, there you go.
Yeah, that made the paper the next day. And Jerry never did figure out why these guys were so important, or what the big deal was with these guys. So then, we just talked about the phrase or the praising Coors Field, and it is an awesome facility. Coors Field ultimately was the end of the Chapultepec. So in 92, when they announced that it was coming, it basically turned the front door into a construction zone for a couple of years. Mm-hmm. And then as time wore on, sports bars and restaurants started filling up all of these, before then were just like warehouses and kind of dicey places. And then now as things are getting trendy, which, that in itself was fine. But on game days, it was so crowded. People that wanted to go to the Chapultepec couldn't park. Had to get through the crowds. The crowds themselves got noisier out on the streets. He had to kind of change music and bring in some stuff to get those guys to come in and patronize the place, since his regulars weren't able to come in quite as easily. And eventually his daughter Angela took over running the place. She had to repaint the Hot Burritos and Cool Jazz mural because it exceeded the maximum number of words allowed. So in other words, we were getting, I don't know what, urbanized? Yeah, exactly. So they had to close earlier because the crowds at closing time were large and unruly. Fights and shootings and general chaos became kind of the standard on that corner. It's sad, and it's still kind of that way today. And she made more adjustments to protect the musicians and staff. There's a great, on YouTube, there's a great 20-minute video on the history of El Chapultepec, if anyone's interested. And she made more adjustments. And one of the things she was talking about was I don't want to have to close the back door because drunks were coming in the back door, which is like the musician's entrance. And or I have to close it and put wet towels at the top and the bottom to keep the tear gas out when things were getting so crazy outside that they started tear gassing the crowds. And so, it was just it just wasn't the right vibe anymore, basically. And so then, in 2020, as we all know, everything shut down because of COVID. Freddie Rodriguez played his last gig before the shutdowns, like kind of the last hurrah. And unfortunately, COVID got to him and he passed away from complications of it. And it was during that shutdown then that the Krantz family reflected on how things were going and decided that they were not going to reopen. So she said, COVID didn't close it. The change in the neighborhood did. Couldn't stay true to the spirit of this new Denver. And so they were the spot in Denver before Denver was a thing. And then now that Denver's a thing,
yeah,
they just couldn't hang.
Because gentrification ruined the spirit.
It did. Yeah. And so now we have the Chapultepec Legacy Project, and the aim is to create a space where multi-generational musicians can continue in the tradition. So they have a place, and gosh, you'd think with all of my notes here. Oh yeah, I do. Dazzle is the bar. There's a piano bar that they call the Chapultepec Piano Bar at Dazzle. And every once in a while, the Legacy Project, that is one of the spaces where they will get together. And in fact, last summer, they had kind of a Chapultepec reunion, minus Freddie, of course, but a reunion concert. And so they're trying to keep the legacy on, trying to keep jazz accessible and low cost so that, folks, anyone can come and enjoy this music. So, yeah, it was an establishment. It was a place to be, a place to see some really great music. And so I'm sad that it's not there, but I totally get it. The last time we went in the 90s before Coors Field opened.
We went when we were still dating. I don't think that we were married at the time. So it was before 93. Right.
So it was kind of before the big transformation took place.
Right. Well, it was at the beginnings of the revitalization, they call it, the gentrification of lower downtown.
Yeah. Yeah. So sadly, this place was a victim of it, but understood. And
one of my favorite dance clubs was also a victim of it.
Yeah.
Rock Island.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, sorry.
It's true. Yeah. But yeah, the building is still there, but it's no longer the Chapultepec.
No, it's not.
But it was a great institution.
This leads me to want to do another one of these podcasts on Denver music and the Denver music scene, because a lot of what happened to the El Chapultepec is sort of reminiscent of what happened to Swallow Hill.
Yeah.
So I would like
the folk scene.
Yeah, the folk music scene that we were a part of.
Yeah.
So I think that's something for the future.
Yeah.
That's something for the
future.
future.
Well, and on the flip side of that, some of these old movie theaters that had shut down and were kind of collapsing became venues then for up and coming groups. When Kat was still at home and wanted to see some of these groups, we'd end up in these places, and how they've turned some of these old historic spaces, rather than watching them get destroyed or just turning to uke, is they've come up with a new way to use them. And yeah, and so it's alive and well, music scene in Denver. Sometimes you just got to look for it a little bit.
Well, on that note, that's our talk on Denver. That's our talk on lower downtown. That is probably going to be, I don't know if I can actually, well, I've got a lot of clips of footage from Alyce's trip that she did with the scavenger hunt down in lower downtown. So we can intersperse a lot of that here. But that was something I was looking for very hard, is to find examples of all of this stuff that we're talking about. I mean, the architecture, the revitalization, what it was like back in the day. It was very hard to find, and it's still very hard to find.
If you can add the link to the Chapultepec thing, since it's on YouTube.
Oh yeah,
it has a lot of great footage of in the day for the Chapultepec.
Yeah, we'll put it, as we do.
Yeah.
So, anyway, that's it for us tonight. Actually, well, not really, because Kris and I actually have an announcement about what we're going to be doing at the end of this week.
Yay!
We're going back to Disneyland, and it's going to be my first trip in Disneyland on my prosthetic. So we'll see how that works. So I don't know, but we'll see.
And we'll record it all.
Yeah, we will. Yeah, we will. So anyway, that's us for tonight. There's not much else to talk about, not much else to do. I don't know if we have anybody have anything else of favorite memories of Lower Downtown.
I mean, I'm in it every day. So
the Western Wear place that was down there.
Oh, yeah.
the building's still there.
I know.
What
was it? Rock something? Was it Rockwell?
Rockwell, I think so.
I don't
We'll look
remember.
it up. We'll put it right there. Anyway, the building's still there.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what's in it. Oh, you know what? Milk Street is really cool too.
Yes. Yes.
It's a food hall in the buildings where they used to bring in the milk and bottle it. So, and then the milk alley is really cool. So,
well, and McGregor Square
is
there's a lot of rich history in that area.
Space, yeah.
So, but yeah.
If you're in town, go visit it.
Yeah.
It's a great place. There's a lot of eateries. There's a lot of cool walking things to do.
Just go to the Union Station.
I know.
I mean,
right?
I love that space. It's a lot of, you get a good view of the whole thing. So anyway, it's, it is another example of how rich Denver's history is and how we are a gateway to a lot of things, and a lot of things were needed and happened here in Denver. And so go visit. It's cool.
Exactly. Anyway, thank you again for joining us. There's not much else we got for tonight. In 2 weeks, we're going to be talking about our Disneyland trip.
Yep.
Because, I mean, that's,
what
once
else
again,
did we do?
Disney adults. I mean,
yeah.
So that's what we'll do. And until then, we will see you guys soon. So thank you again for joining us.
Bye, everybody. Thank
Good
you.
night.